My dear friends, we live in a culture where many are denying the existence of God. So today I wanted to look at the cell and show you that evolution can't create a cell, but only God can. So throughout this presentation, we're going to have a couple of very interesting pictures that I will kind of explain along the process. They have really nothing to do with the presentation, but it's just very interesting for me while I was doing all of this research. The picture you see right here, this is a picture of a zebrafish's brain. A zebrafish is about 1 inch long, so its brain is very, very tiny. But one scientist took this fish's brain and took a picture of every single brain cell that this fish had and put together this amazing photograph. So this is about 5,000 pictures put all together into one photograph. So this is why I want to talk about cells. This is absolutely amazing. So to start off, I want to read Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. The Bible says that anybody who looks at nature or at God's creation will see God's handiwork. Nobody who really studies the sciences, such as the science of stars, plants, living things, or cells that we're going to talk about, is going to be able to honestly say that God doesn't exist. Looking at God's creation and saying that this all happened by chance is like looking at a painting and saying that this painting just happened by chance. The reason people don't want to believe in God is because if God doesn't exist, they can sin and do whatever they want. Creation is God's work of art. God is a creator, just like a sculptor who creates a sculpture, a person who designs a building. But the biggest difference between us as human creators and God as a creator is that God doesn't need anything. He just speaks things into existence. God's signature is all over his creation. This is why Romans 1:20 says that man is without excuse not to believe in God. I think that we can all call nature God's first missionary. Where there is no Bible, there's always the amazing cell that you can look at. There's amazing wildflowers and mountains, trees, rivers, and all of this speaks to the existence of God. God will always reveal himself in his creation. And you were probably looking at this picture and wondering, what in the world was that? So this is a leg of a diving beetle. Can you imagine? Look at those colors, all that detail. That is absolutely amazing. So to start off, when we're talking about God's creation, I think that it's absolutely amazing that everything is made from a collection of cells that work together in harmony. But before the mid 1650s, so that is around 350 years ago, nobody even knew that cells existed. But there was this scientist, his name was Robert Hooke, and he was looking at a cork tree. So cork comes from a cork tree, and it's the outside of that tree. It's kind of like the tree's bark. And he was looking at this through a microscope, and he saw these different and all these little compartments. And he named those compartments cells, and it came from the word as like a prison cell. And then jumping 200 years forward to the mid 1850s, they finally created this theory that every single thing, every living organism comes from a collection of many, many cells. And this was only 150 years ago that people finally realized that everything is made up of very tiny, small cells. And you may be wondering, what is the picture on the bottom left? So that is called diatomaceous earth. So these are these small little living one-celled organisms that swim throughout the whole ocean. And if you look really closely, they are all very beautifully designed. They are all symmetrical, and they're just absolutely beautiful. And the creation of these small cells shows us that there is an intelligent creator. So my dear friends, what do you think? What is more complicated, a cell that you see on the right side of the picture or an airplane? Can I have a show of hands? Airplane or cell? So who thinks airplane? is more complicated than a cell? Any takers? Okay, we have a few. How about a cell? Who thinks a cell is more complicated? Okay, sounds good. How about this Boeing factory that we have in Boeing? What is more complicated, the factory that makes the airplanes or just one cell? So who votes for the factory? Okay, we have a few more hands. How about the cell? Okay, sounds good. So who thinks what is more complicated, the city or the cell? Who votes for the city? Okay, and who votes for the cell? Alrighty. Well, my dear friends, a cell is much more complicated than the airplane factory, and a huge city. And the reason I gave this little illustration is because to create such a cell, you need an intelligent creator. And this intelligent creator is God. We don't have time to talk about how all those small little cell parts work, the ribosomes, Golgi complex, mitochondria. You will be all learning this in school as time goes on. But the most important thing is to remember is that God is the creator of all of this. And when we look at God's creation, everything needs to have a working order. Every single cell, if we look at them, we can see God's handiwork within those cells. But for a cell to function, it has to be programmed. And the way these cells program is God created these things, and they are called chromosomes. So this is a genetic information that tells a cell what to do. And you can see a chromosome on the top left picture over there, and it kind of looks like a big X. So this chromosome, when you take it and you stretch it out completely, it's going to be 6 feet long, so about how tall I am. And that is in every single cell that you have. But the amazing thing is that it's not just like stuffed and just put like into a little small compartment, but it's very neatly organized so that your cell can go to these little areas within this genetic information and pull out the information that it needs. And the cell, and so the information, so those letters that you see on the right side of the screen, that is the genetic code that is written in those chromosomes, and that is how your cell knows what it needs to do. So the body has 37 trillion cells. 37 trillion. That is not billion. We're talking trillion cells. So there's a lot of information that God put into every single cell. So for example, if we take your body, we take every single cell that you have, we take out all of the chromosomes that we have in your cell, and we stretch them out to 6 feet tall, kind of how I am, we would be able to put all of those chromosomes together and go from the sun to Pluto, back and forth 17 times. Can you imagine how much information God put into your cells? This is absolutely astounding. This is mind-boggling. This is very exciting. I love this. So if we put it into another perspective, who has ever read a 500-page book? Show of hands. We have a few takers. So how many books of information do you think is in one cell? Any takers? Just shout it out. Okay, let's do this. Maybe I'll ask you. So what do you think? Maybe a cell has 5 books of information that are 500 pages long? Who thinks 5? Not many. How about 20? Okay, we have a few hands. How about 50? Okay, a little bit more. How about 100? How about 200? 300. So every single cell has enough of information to fill up 300 books that are 500 pages long. And don't forget, that's only for one single cell that you have. Remember that picture of all those letters that I showed you? That is how much information every single cell has. And what does that show? That shows that there is an intelligent creator who created you, and that intelligent creator is God. Another idea that I want to tell you about is in school they teach you how things were created over a long period of time. A lot of problems had to happen, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get life. But when we look at a cell, there's a concept that is called the all or none concept. The very fancy scientific name you can see in parentheses, it's called irreducible complexity. So what does this idea say? So this idea says that for a cell to function, it has to function 100% correctly from the start. You cannot have a half-functioning cell. For example, if we take this mousetrap, there's 5 parts to this mousetrap. You have a platform, spring, hammer, catch, and holding bar. So if we take, say, the hammer away, would this be a working mousetrap or no? Yes, everybody's shaking their head no. The same concept applies to your cell. Your cell has to function 100% correctly for it to actually work. And that's how God created it. The amazing thing is that Hebrews says that in the book of Hebrews, God says that God spoke the universe into existence. Not just the cells that we were talking about and how much information there is. So every single cell in your body, for every single human, with all of the stars, galaxies, and planets, God just spoke it into existence from nothing. That is absolutely amazing. Another thing that I want to talk about is the world's smallest motor. So this is another example of intelligent design. Intelligent design means that somebody had to create it, that chance could not do it, but that only God could create this. So some cells in your body need a motor to be able to get around to where they need to go. We build motors with things like metal, carbon fiber, wood maybe, or some kind of plastic or some kind of other building material. But God uses even smaller living things called proteins to make these motors work. The thing is that these motors, this little motor that you see on the left side of the screen, is much more complicated than any motor that we have ever invented, such as the car engine or even the rocket engine. This is much more complicated if you get down to the chemical level. The amazing thing is that on the right side of the picture is you see a human-made metal part for an engine, and then the same concept is in a cell's motor. So people will look at the metal and say that this was designed, but they look at the left side, the bluish with the red and the yellow, and they say that this was created by chance. And I find that absolutely astounding of how people look at God's creation and just do not see God within that. And this is how bad people want to deny the presence of God. But as Christians, we can look at God's creation and be totally amazed by what He created. And the background, so I'm ending, so we're almost done here. So the background that you see over here, these cells are called endothelial cells. So it's a very fancy word, but what these cells do is, so everybody has arteries and veins, and that's how your blood flows throughout your whole body. But these are very special cells because they are non-sticky cells. So for example, if you didn't have these cells, all of your blood would just be stuck within your veins. But these cells help all of your blood flow. And as we were talking about today, in conclusion, every cell shows that there is a creator. And because all of these cells are extremely complicated, we cannot deny the existence of God. In school, they're going to teach you evolution. They're going to try to destroy your faith. But always remember how complicated things have had to be able to work right away. And God creates everything very, very amazingly. And the last verse that I want to read today is Ecclesiastes 12:13 through 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. God created everything, and there will be a day that we are all going to stand before God in judgment. Solomon wrote these words, and he was the smartest person in the world who has ever lived or will ever live. At the end of his life, Solomon is making a conclusion that nothing in life matters apart from two things: fearing God and keeping his commandments. When we believe that God exists, we will fear God and we will keep his commandments. Cells clearly show us that God created everything, and that leaves us no excuse not to believe in God. Amen.